going to move us on to our next presentation. And that is using the WorldCat API to integrate holdings information and ILS data, presented by Chesko and Devarenne. Chesko is an IT systems administrator at Western Washington University's Western Libraries. In addition to his sysadmin duties, he works with library colleagues to automate workflows and integrate systems and processes. He's been working in library automation for over 30 years and has enjoyed every minute of it. Devarenne is a collection management and assessment librarian at Western Washington University's Western Libraries. In her role, she collaborates with colleagues across library departments to implement assessment projects and streamline data management processes. All right, Ron and Sid, whenever you're ready, take it away.
Okay. All right. Thank you for coming to our presentation. My name is Devarenne, and I'm here with my colleague, Ron Chesko, and we're going to talk about our project to develop a method for integrating holdings data from WorldCat with data from our ILS, which streamlined several of our library's routine collection management procedures. First, I'll give a bit of background about the beginning of this project. In 2022, Western Libraries implemented a plan for a 4-year cycle of management for the library's main print monograph collection, which has about 500,000 items. The plan calls for an inventory and review of 2 major sections of library stacks each year. As part of this, my work unit, Collection Management and Assessment, is responsible for preparing a review list of items in each library wing. Then subject liaison librarians will use that review list and identify any candidates for withdrawal or replacement. Prior to the first round of collection review, we completed a project to prepare a test version of this review list. A project group assessed the feasibility of collecting and preparing a list of desired data points, including bibliographic details, circulation statistics, availability of duplicate copies, and the number of libraries in WorldCat holding the title. So for projects like this, where we need to fetch item and library activity data in large quantities, we use the analytics platform for our ILS, which is Alma Analytics. We can run queries against our ILS and build reports to retrieve bibliographic details, circulation statistics, and local availability information for large numbers of items all at once and all in one place. And among the different data points that we can retrieve in analytics is an item's OCLC number. Then we know that this number is also in WorldCat attached to a WorldCat record where we can see the number of libraries holding that item. So we know that there's this identifier connecting these 2 data sources. And we know that there is some data interoperability between ALMA and OCLC when it comes to libraries holding data. Libraries can configure ALMA to publish their holdings to OCLC. Then in terms of analytics, ALMA makes data available for use in the analytics platform through scheduled database refreshes. But ALMA does not have access to data about WorldCat holdings at other libraries. Thus, that data is not loaded to and retrievable in the analytics platform. So at this point, we were asking, would we have to look items up one by one in WorldCat? That would not be a sustainable workflow. Another consideration was the number of steps that there would be in the process of joining data sets from multiple sources. It would be nice to make it as smooth of a process as possible to combine these different data sets. And then finally, could we find a way to make this WorldCat holdings data available for use in other contexts? So in searching for potential tools we could use, I found documentation for the WorldCat Search API, which seemed like a promising option from OCLC's developer network site. You can see states that you can find about libraries that hold an item based on an OCLC number. And then on the screen here, I have some sample output from the API. At this point, then I reached out to Ron to find out if it was possible to develop a procedure to use the WorldCat API holdings data, or sorry, to use the WorldCat API to collect WorldCat holdings data in batches for collection management work.
So this is where I'll jump in, just to give you a little glimpse into my approach to development. Obviously, we had to figure out what the requirements for the solution were. Our input is, of course, OCLC numbers, which Sid would deliver to me in a CSV file. The output, we need the holdings counts and we need to associate the OCLC number with it so that Sid can do her processing once she has all that information. Mechanics wise, I'm working in Python since it's a good with data manipulation, among other things. And notebooks in particular are handy when you're developing and also great for explanation and demonstrations like this one. We may move on to what I call Python proper if we want to automate the process more. In this case, the Python code would be put on a server along with a web form to upload the input file and retrieve the output, or even set up folders where the input file could be uploaded and the output file downloaded or emailed to the user. Next slide, please. So how do we get the data? We have our list of OCLC numbers. Which WorldCat API should we use? As Sid said, she was working through and she found a couple of options. There are quite a few choices, and many provide the same data as output. So you kind of have to shop around for what you're looking for. Obviously, you want to get maybe just the amount of data that you're looking for so that you're not generating a lot of traffic. The API dashboard comes in very handy. We've got a link to it here in the slide. We don't have time to jump to into the dashboard for this presentation, but it's worth looking at to see what the inputs and filters are available, and more importantly, what data is output and how it's formatted. As Sid showed, there was a little bit of data that she had posted on her slide. Which Python libraries do we need? We need to be able to get access to the API, which is basically just an HTTP GET request. We also have to store and save the data that we retrieve. What should our output look like? Sid and I decided that another CSV file would work for her needs. Next slide, please. API authentication was a concern. The version 1 API used a key, which you just added to your API URL as a parameter. The version 2 API, which is what we're using because the version 1 isn't available anymore, uses OAuth 2.0 and involves tokens. The challenge is that the token expires in a relatively short period of time. This is fine for one-off calls for data, but not so great for batches of data we are trying to fetch. So we have to watch the clock and renew the token periodically. There are links on the last slide of this presentation that give detailed information about how OCLC uses OAuth and tokens. Next slide, please. So we're going to take a look at a solution. There are many ways to go about this using different languages and utilities. This is just one of those solutions. I'm not a professional programmer, but I do play one on TV. We're going to take a look at the Colab notebook, which has a library block of code, a token function so that we can regenerate those tokens and keep track of them, and the main block that does the bulk of the work. I've linked the code on my GitHub so you can follow along at home if you'd like. So we're going to try the dreaded screen sharing handoff right now. So let's see if this works. Alrighty, hopefully everybody can see my screen now. I've got a Google Colab notebook up on my screen. All right, so I'm going to move through this pretty quickly because we don't have time to get into all the nuts and bolts of Python or Colab notebooks. But you have my contact information, or you will by the end of this presentation. Feel free to reach out to me. I am happy to talk at length about any of this. So in our Colab notebook here, I've got some markdown blocks which give a lot of detail. You'll also find some inline comments in here, which give even more information. So our first block here is our library block. I import the requests library, which basically allows me to do those HTTP GETs to send queries to the API. I use the pandas library for data manipulation. Pretty common library for that. Working on this, I do everything with my Google Drive, so I'm importing some Google Colab stuff so that I can access my drive. We import the CSV library for working with CSV files, and then the datetime library for being able to work with dates and times very easily. The next block is our tokens function. This tokens function essentially either creates a brand new token for us to use when we're making our calls, or as we're going through and we see that the token's going to expire, it renews the token. It accesses the OCLC OAuth URL and then goes through and preps that URL call. You will need a client ID and a client secret, which you can get through your OCLC developer account. And those just plug in right there. The main part of the code where we're actually getting the data, we start out by opening our CSV file and loading it into a pandas data frame. We run a pandas method to drop any duplicate OCLC numbers in case they're in there. Next, we create an output list so that we can save our data as we're grabbing it. And then we do our first get token request, where we get our initial token and grab all the information that we need for the token. Then we jump into our loop where we are iterating through those rows of data that we grabbed from our CSV file. We're getting the time right now, and we're adding 1 minute to it so that we have kind of a buffer as we're going through and checking each time to make sure that it hasn't expired. We use our datetime library to change the format on the expiration date that we got from our token up here. This allows us to compare that date along with our date time along with our 1 minute date time. And then we check each time to see if we're getting close to being the expiration of the token. We've got the get token here. If we do manage to reach that, passing the token back to renew it. Next, we grab our OCLC number, which is in the column of our particular row that we're pulling. And then we use string concatenation to create our URL. Here's all the information that we've got from the OCLC API. We're adding in the OCLC number, and then we're adding some additional parameters on here so that we're only looking, we set holding all addition to false because we only want the addition that we're looking for, and our preferred language is English. There are many more that you can find on the dashboard with that. Next, we're calling our GET request along with our headers, which has our token information. Again, more information about this in the links at the end of the presentation. We're getting our response. We're making sure that our response is in a JSON format. And then we're drilling down through that JSON record looking for our total holdings count here, saving it into count. We're creating a row along with our OCLC number and our count, and we're appending it to that output list that we created earlier on. This loops through all of our OCLC numbers and our information. And then finally, we load this into a pandas data frame with our column names, and then finally write that data frame out to a CSV file. CSV file looks like this. Is our OCLC number and our total holdings count. And it's at this point that this data gets handed off to Sid, who's going to explain what we do with it next.
Okay, so now that Ron had figured out this solution for retrieving the holdings data in batches, some of the next things we were considering were what to do with that output to create a streamlined process for combining it with data from other sources. How could we maximize the reusability of that data and make it available for other workflows? So as with most of our procedures, we had to work out something that did not incur any additional costs. I also wanted to make sure I didn't come up with something that would be labor intensive to maintain and that we would have the flexibility to continue iterating on the process. And finally, if it was going to be widely reusable, it needed to be user-friendly, so it was simple to pick up and integrate into other workflows. So at Western, we have organizational access to Microsoft 365 and Power BI Pro. So these were the tools I chose to work with. Overall, what I decided to do was save these output files in a SharePoint document library. Then I created a Power BI data flow, which combined those files and centrally stored the combined data. Power BI data flows allow you to connect to data sources, create some transformation logic, and then load that to Power BI workspaces, which are available from your browser. People then, with the right permissions, can connect to the data flow from within Excel or Power BI and bring that data into their projects, reusing your data connections and your transformation logic. So this is a little more detail about the steps in my process, although this is not going to go into too much depth about how to use these tools. I have a screenshot of what it looks like when I've started creating a new data flow. It prompts to choose a data source, which in this case is that SharePoint folder with the output files. In the other screenshot, you can see what it looks like when you connect to a SharePoint file. It's access or a SharePoint folder. It's accessing the contents of a SharePoint site as a table with columns for the SharePoint metadata. And at the beginning of the table, that column contains the actual contents of each one of those files. So from there, I'm actually able to expand the contents of the files and then combine them into a single table. Then it takes me to the data flow editor. If you have used Power Query before in Excel or Power BI, you'll recognize that the data flow editor is also Power Query. So if you have experience with that tool, it's going to be transferable to creating data flows. At this point, I can perform any additional data transformations. I've created a column in the output files that records the date that they were collected. So I can set up my data flow to when it encounters the same OCLC number with WorldCat holdings data, it's actually only going to pull in the most recently collected data. Once I have my final table looking the way I want, I save the data flow. Then the connection to the data source, the transformation logic, and the resulting table are all centrally stored in my Power BI space. I can then refresh that data flow as I add new folders or add new files to the SharePoint folder, or schedule it to refresh automatically. And then this is going to update the table with the new data. Once the data flow is set up, you can connect to it using Power Query from Excel or in Power BI. These screenshots are from Excel. So Power Platform will be one of the options for data sources you can connect to. And you can select a specific data flow to connect to. In that preview, you can see I've now connected to that combined table that I created. All of those data preparation steps are taking place in the data flow. And so anyone connecting to this doesn't have to worry about repeating them here. So we are working from a centralized, consistent data source. This makes fetching WorldCat Holdings data and combining it with data from other sources at least somewhat smoother than it would be if I were always combining several separate flat data files. If I have a list of items and I have already fetched that WorldCat Holdings data, I can easily pull it into whatever project I'm working on. So the outcomes of this project, I think there were a lot of successes, namely that we were able to automate the process of retrieving WorldCat Holdings using the OCLC numbers out of ALMA. And then using tools already available to us, we were able to set up a way to prepare, store, and access that WorldCat Holdings data and reuse it in other contexts. Some future directions we might explore include looking into further automating the process of using the API. And we also might experiment with different options for storing the output data. So thank you for watching our presentation. And as Ron mentioned, we're providing our contact information here if you want to talk further about any of the things that have been demonstrated.
Okay, thank you very much, Ron and Sid. That was a really great and informative presentation. If anyone has any questions, please use the Q&A button and drop them there. And now I'm going to ask any questions that have been dropped there. We do have one right now that is, could you share a specific question you wanted to answer utilizing this information, Power BI data?
In other contexts besides the weeding project, of course, yeah. So the main application of the WorldCat Holdings data is when considering whether to withdraw an item, we want to check its availability elsewhere. This is also applicable if we are making choices about replacing damaged items. And also we do have some space constraints. We do try to be thoughtful about our acquisitions. So this is sort of another piece of data that can be informative in doing collection development. So those are a few other contexts in which this is useful. And then I guess sort of another side to this is by making it easier to get to this data and use it, we can find new ways to use it that we might not have thought about because we assumed that would be adding a lot of labor to the process.
Okay, thank you. Our next question is, how cumbersome is it to create an OCLC developer account?
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, Sid.
I was going to say I'll let you answer that one.
Oh, okay. The account, I came on to Western after they were already set up with an OCLC account. We've got um, an OCLC symbol number and everything, and we participate with them. I was able to set up an account and get access pretty easily. And all of the information, the dashboard that I was talking about, is available to anyone. I think that you just need to go through whoever is the person who's in charge of your OCLC account on your premises or at your institution, and see about getting access to the actual client IDs and secrets. If you want to shoot me a message, I can get you more details on that.
All right, thank you. Our next question, can you give us a sense of the scale to which you've done this? Do you have the OCLC holdings information now in a spreadsheet for your whole collection, 50%?
In the data flow now, I have iterated through each wing of the main print monograph collection at least once. So I think we are close to 100% there, excluding any places where there were errors or accidental omissions.
Okay, thank you. Next question. So in this use case project, the simple number of holdings was all that was needed? Or will another phase look at who/where the libraries are? In other words, Washington, Europe, Australia. Or is that left for the collection librarian's own work? If you wanted more granular holdings, like Orbis, do you see a way to fetch/use that data in this process?
I can answer two parts of that. We do also collect Orbis Cascade Alliance holdings. We are actually able to do that, though, through the Ex Libris SRU, and that allows us to look up things in the ALMA network zone. Uh, I There are the WorldCat APIs do some of them do provide more granular information. Or yeah, they provide, I think, close to complete lists of the actual specific libraries, and some characteristics of those libraries, including the region, as well as categorizing them as academic or public, which I think could be really interesting. So there are a lot of options for getting more granular and kind of answering different questions. And then one more thing is, I think Ron can answer this. There might be some issues currently with how the geographic parameter on this API works.
Yeah, I can't remember what that was. It's been a while since we troubleshot that. I know that looking at the actual dashboard and what filters are available, there are a number of filters specifically with this API endpoint that you can filter down by country and state and particular groups. If you've got a group symbol, you can also look at specific institution symbols. So if you're looking for one specific institution that may hold something, so there's a lot of options. Again, I urge everybody who's interested in it to take a look at the dashboard. And again, we had to speed through this pretty quickly. So if you contact Sid or I, we're more than happy to speak at length about the code, Power BI, and the APIs. I'm part of an API group through the Orbis Cascade Alliance, and I'm more than happy to talk hours and hours about APIs and programming. So yeah, don't be afraid to reach out.
Okay, well, that is it for our questions. Thanks again, Ron and Sid, for that presentation. That was really great. And just a reminder, we will be sharing all of today's recordings and slides with all of the attendees in about 2 weeks' time or so. Um, with that, we are going to take a brief 10-minute break. We will be resuming at 2:30 for our final two sessions of the day, and we hope to see you all there.